to find light in darkness and strength in vulnerability, hold wholeness within brokenness, and discover yourself through embracing your shadow. But how well can you truly know yourself if you refuse to look in the shadows? And what if understanding this darkness could unlock hidden talents, creative energy, and a deeper sense of purpose? For millennia, humanity has sought to understand the complex interplay between light and darkness, good and evil. This ancient question has led to various explorations in mythology, religion, and philosophy, each offering unique perspectives on the nature of the shadow and its role in the human experience. Our relationship with the shadow is thought to be as old as consciousness itself. Throughout history, cultures around the world have explored this inner landscape through myth, ritual, and symbolism. The roots of understanding this duality can be traced back to ancient civilizations, where early thinkers grappled with the fundamental question of human nature. Driven by a desire to understand the complexities of the human psyche, Carl Jung pioneered work illuminating the concept of the shadow archetype, emphasizing his perspective that the shadow is not merely negative, but also contains untapped potential. Jung writes, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." This idea resonated with later Jungian analysts, like Marie-Louise von Franz, who further developed and refined the concept of shadow integration as a means of achieving psychological wholeness. And yet, despite this long history, integrating this shadow remains elusive for many. This brings us to the central question facing us today. How can we learn to acknowledge, accept, and integrate our shadow selves, harnessing its energy for personal growth and transformation? Understanding the shadow is not about eliminating darkness, but about illuminating it and harnessing its energy for personal growth. It is a complex journey, but an essential one for anyone seeking to live a more authentic and fulfilling life. Embracing the shadow allows us to become more genuine and less prone to self-deception. In this video, we'll embark on a journey to define the shadow, explore its manifestations in mythology and personal relationships, and most importantly, uncover techniques for owning and integrating our shadows to create lasting change. By immersing yourself in this exploration, you'll learn not just about the shadow, but also learn to recognize it in your own life, understand its influence, and begin to consciously shape the narrative of your own becoming. So, let's embark on this exploration of the shadow and discover the transformative power that lies hidden within our own vulnerabilities. So, where does this leave us regarding the disowned aspects of ourselves? We've defined the shadow, but it's more than just a repository of negativity. To truly understand it, we must differentiate between the personal shadow and the collective shadow, each influencing us in distinct yet interconnected ways. The personal shadow, as the name suggests, comprises the disowned aspects of an individual's personality. It's the unique collection of traits, emotions, and impulses that we've repressed or rejected, often because they don't align with our conscious self-image or societal expectations. Consider, for example, a person who prides themselves on being rational and logical, suppressing any outward display of emotion. Deep within their personal shadow may lie a longing for emotional expression, a secret envy of those who freely weep or laugh. This repressed emotionality doesn't simply vanish. It festers in the unconscious, potentially manifesting as sudden outbursts, difficulty connecting with others on an emotional level, or even physical symptoms. The personal shadow, therefore, is a highly individualized landscape, shaped by our unique experiences and vulnerabilities. However, the shadow extends beyond the personal realm. The collective shadow represents the shared, repressed aspects of a group, community, or even an entire society. It's the accumulation of societal taboos, prejudices, and historical traumas that are disowned and projected onto marginalized groups or scapegoats. Think of the historical persecution of minority groups, the scapegoating of immigrants, or the denial of systemic inequalities. These phenomena often stem from a collective unwillingness to confront uncomfortable truths about a society's past and present. This collective shadow can manifest as discrimination, social unrest, and even violence. What happens when a society refuses to acknowledge its own dark side? The contents of the shadow are far more diverse than one might initially assume. While it certainly includes negative traits like anger, greed, and envy, it also encompasses positive qualities that have been repressed. This is a crucial point, as the common misconception that the shadow is purely negative can hinder the process of integration. Consider the shy person who secretly desires to be a performer, yearning to express themselves on stage, but held back by fear of judgment. Or the individual who constantly prioritizes the needs of others, repressing their own assertiveness and desires for personal fulfillment. These repressed positive traits, these shadow gifts, represent untapped potential, waiting to be reclaimed and integrated into the conscious personality. Societal expectations and early childhood experiences play a significant role in shaping the shadow's contents, dictating which traits are deemed acceptable and which are relegated to the unconscious. Are we truly aware of the potential that lies dormant within our shadows? The shadow is not a static entity. It is a dynamic force, constantly evolving and adapting, influenced by our experiences and relationships. It is like a chameleon, changing its colors to reflect our inner and outer worlds. As we encounter new challenges and form new relationships, the shadow shifts and transforms, presenting us with opportunities for growth and integration. It acts as a gatekeeper to hidden potential and untapped resources, guarding the very qualities we need to become more whole and authentic. Therefore, the shadow is not something to be feared or suppressed, but rather a source of invaluable information about ourselves. If the shadow is a part of us, what happens when we deny it? This brings us to the concept of psychological projection, the unconscious act of attributing our own disowned traits, emotions, or impulses to others. Psychological projection, as conceptualized by Jung, can be understood as an unconscious defense mechanism. It is not a conscious act of deception, but rather an unconscious strategy employed by the ego to protect itself from the discomfort of acknowledging undesirable aspects of oneself. Drawing on Jung's writings, projection can be more clearly understood. Jung writes, "The effect of projection is to isolate the subject from his environment, since instead of a real relation to it, there is now only an illusory one. In essence, we see the world not as it is, but as we are." Projection manifests in myriad ways in our everyday relationships, often leading to misunderstandings, conflict, and distorted perceptions. Consider a romantic relationship where one partner is secretly critical of themselves. To avoid acknowledging this self-criticism, they constantly accuse their partner of being critical, hyper-analyzing their words and actions for signs of disapproval. This projection creates a vicious cycle of defensiveness and resentment, hindering genuine communication and intimacy. Projection can also create a scapegoat effect, where one person becomes the target of another's disowned negativity. In a family, for example, one child might be labeled as the problem child, bearing the brunt of the parents' repressed anger and frustration. However, understanding the mechanism of projection can pave the way for improved communication, empathy, and conflict resolution. When we become aware of our tendency to project, we can begin to own our projections, recognizing that what we dislike in others may reflect something we dislike in ourselves. This is not always an easy task, as it requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about our own character. But with practice, we can learn to identify and manage our projections, preventing them from poisoning our relationships. How can recognizing our projections help us better understand ourselves and others? Mythology and fairy tales, often dismissed as mere entertainment, frequently provide symbolic representations of the shadow and its integration. These stories, passed down through generations, offer invaluable insights into the human psyche and the process of individuation. Archetypes, those universal patterns of behavior and imagery play a central role in shaping these narratives, lending them enduring relevance across cultures and time periods. These stories invite us to look inward. Consider the archetype of the trickster, a recurring figure in mythologies around the world, embodying the shadow's disruptive and chaotic nature. In Norse mythology, Loki stands out as a prime example. With his mischievousness, amorality, and penchant for challenging the established order, Loki embodies the shadow's capacity for both destruction and transformation. While his actions often sow chaos and discord, they can also lead to unexpected positive outcomes, forcing the guards to confront their own limitations and adapt to changing circumstances. Loki's actions aren't always destructive. His antics reveal hidden truths and expose hypocrisy. The fairy tale of Beauty and the Beast also serves as a potent allegory for shadow integration and the transformative power of love. The beast, initially monstrous and repulsive, can be interpreted as a representation of the shadow self, burdened by repressed emotions and wounded by past traumas. Beauty's acceptance of the beast's shadow, her ability to see beyond his outward appearance and recognize his inner goodness, ultimately leads to his transformation and their mutual growth. Through compassion and understanding, Beauty helps the beast integrate his shadow, unlocking his true potential and redeeming his humanity. What beasts do we need to befriend within ourselves? It's paramount to reiterate that the shadow is not solely negative. It also contains untapped potential and hidden strengths. Many often overlook the shadow because it's believed to be negative. Within the shadow, positive traits such as assertiveness, healthy aggression, creativity, and passion are often repressed. These traits, when integrated into the conscious personality, can become valuable assets. Think of assertiveness, the ability to stand up for oneself and one's beliefs, often suppressed for fear of conflict or disapproval. Or healthy aggression, the capacity to assert boundaries and protect oneself from harm, often demonized as violent or destructive. When channeled appropriately, assertiveness and healthy aggression can empower us to navigate the world with confidence and integrity. Accessing the shadow, therefore, can lead to greater authenticity, creativity, and a deeper sense of purpose. Shadow gifts, those hidden talents and abilities waiting to be discovered, often lie dormant within the unconscious, waiting to be awakened. Many artists, writers, and innovators have drawn inspiration from their own shadow aspects, channeling their repressed emotions and unconventional ideas into groundbreaking works of art. Consider the works of Edgar Allan Poe, whose dark and macabre tales often explored the depths of human depravity and psychological torment. Or the music of Kurt Cobain, whose angst-ridden lyrics and raw performances resonated with a generation struggling with alienation and disillusionment. These artists embraced their shadows, transforming their pain into powerful expressions of creativity. Self-compassion and acceptance are the cornerstones of successful shadow integration. Shadow work is not about self-criticism or self-punishment. It's about understanding and embracing all aspects of ourselves, even the ones we find unsettling. Approach your shadow with kindness and curiosity, recognizing that it is a part of you, not an enemy to be defeated. Engage with specific shadow integration techniques, such as dream analysis, active imagination, and journaling, allowing for an exploration that is safe and productive. How can we begin to actively engage with our own shadows and unlock their hidden potential? Because what we'll discover next about integrating our shadows is even more revealing than you might think. How can we begin to actively engage with our own shadows and unlock their hidden potential? Dream analysis offers a potent pathway, a royal road to the unconscious, as Freud famously put it, allowing us to bypass our conscious defenses and encounter our shadow in symbolic form. Dreams act as a stage where the repressed aspects of our personality play out their roles, revealing hidden emotions, denied desires, and unacknowledged traumas. Dreams often speak in a language of symbols and metaphors, requiring careful interpretation to decipher their hidden meanings. Are we ready to understand what they are trying to tell us? Common shadow figures that appear in dreams include pursuers, monsters, and dark, indistinct shapes. A dream of being chased by a shadowy figure might represent fear of one's own anger or aggression, indicating a need to integrate these powerful emotions in a healthy way. Marie-Louise von Franz, a close collaborator of Jung, writes, "The shadow is a living part of the personality and therefore wants to live with it in some way. It cannot be argued with or suppressed. Sooner or later, the repressed contents come to the surface anyway." A dream of encountering a terrifying monster could symbolize repressed trauma, demanding to be acknowledged and healed. It's crucial to remember that the specific meaning of a dream symbol is unique to each individual, shaped by their personal history and emotional landscape. The interpretations are meant to be a guide, but not literal. To interpret shadow dreams effectively, pay close attention to the emotions, actions, and overall context of the dream. What feelings did the dream evoke in you? What actions did the shadow figures take? What was the setting of the dream, and how did it contribute to the overall atmosphere? Dream journaling can be a valuable tool for recording and analyzing your dreams over time, helping you to identify recurring patterns and themes. After writing down your dreams, reflect on the feelings that came up during your dream. Ask yourself what shadow elements might be at play. Consider the scenario in your waking life. Did the dream come after a conflict or difficult situation? Did it come after an inspiring moment? While not every dream has a profound shadow meaning, our nightly visions can be a powerful tool to explore the inner landscape of our unconscious. Dream analysis provides valuable insights into our shadow, but it is just one piece of the puzzle. Active imagination, a Jungian technique for consciously engaging with the unconscious, provides another powerful tool for shadow integration. Active imagination can be described as a dialogue between the conscious mind and the shadow, a process of entering into a waking dream state and interacting with the figures that arise from the unconscious. Jung considered active imagination to be one of the most important techniques for psychological integration. Are we brave enough to engage in an active dialogue with our shadow? The first step in active imagination is to create a safe and comfortable space, free from distractions. Close your eyes, relax your body, and focus on an image or feeling that arises from within. It could be an image from a recent dream, a recurring thought, or a strong emotion. Allow the unconscious to unfold without trying to control or direct it. As figures emerge from your unconscious, engage with them as you would in a real conversation. Ask them questions, express your emotions, and explore their motivations. What do they want from you? What are they afraid of? Approach your shadow figures with respect and curiosity, even if they seem frightening or unpleasant. Jung writes, "The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well." Imagine, for example, that you are engaging in active imagination and a dark, cloaked figure appears before you. Instead of recoiling in fear, you approach the figure with curiosity and ask, "Who are you? What do you represent?" The figure might respond with words, images, or feelings, revealing hidden aspects of your personality that you have disowned or repressed. Perhaps the figure represents your repressed anger, your fear of vulnerability, or your longing for creative expression. By engaging in this dialogue, you can begin to understand the shadow's motivations and integrate its energies into your conscious life. However, it is important to acknowledge that engaging with the shadow can have unintended negative consequences. It is highly recommended to consult with a trained therapist before engaging in this activity. Active imagination can be a transformative tool for healing old wounds, resolving inner conflicts, and unlocking hidden potential. But what happens when we encounter our shadow, not in the realm of dreams or imagination, but in the context of our everyday relationships? This leads us to the crucial concept of projection and the importance of owning our projections to foster more authentic and fulfilling connections. Can we truly see others as they are, or are we merely seeing reflections of our own disowned selves? Projection, as we've discussed, is the unconscious act of attributing our own disowned traits, emotions, or impulses to others. In relationships, projection can manifest as constant criticism, unwarranted suspicion, or intense emotional reactions. When we project our shadow onto others, we are essentially seeing our own disowned qualities reflected back to us, often in a distorted or exaggerated form. Our projections act as a mirror. To improve our relationships, we must learn to recognize when we are projecting our shadow onto others and take responsibility for our own internal landscape. To identify our projections in relationships, pay close attention to strong emotional reactions, recurring patterns, and judgments we make about others. If you find yourself constantly criticizing someone for being lazy or incompetent, it may be a sign that you are projecting your own repressed feelings of inadequacy or your own desire to avoid responsibility. Or if you are constantly suspicious of your partner's motives, it could be a projection of your own repressed feelings of guilt or your own temptation to be unfaithful. Ask yourself, what is it about this person that bothers me so much? What feelings are evoked? Reclaiming our projections requires acknowledging the disowned qualities within ourselves and integrating them into our conscious personality. This process requires self-compassion, self-acceptance, and a willingness to embrace our imperfections. Instead of judging ourselves harshly for having negative traits, we can learn to understand the origins of these traits and find healthy ways to express them. Journaling is another practice in reclaiming our projections. Pick one person who you find difficult. Journal about what you dislike about this person. Then ask yourself how those traits exist within yourself. While it may be an extreme jump, can you learn to love these parts of yourself? Owning our projections can lead to more authentic, fulfilling, and harmonious relationships. When we stop projecting our shadow onto others, we can see them more clearly, appreciate their unique qualities, and connect with them on a deeper level. But the complexities of the human experience extend far beyond the realm of individual relationships. What happens when the shadow takes hold not within a single person, but within an entire society? Is it possible to heal the wounds of an entire community? The collective shadow represents the shared, repressed aspects of a group, society, or culture. It manifests in prejudice, discrimination, violence, and other forms of social injustice. Historical examples of the collective shadow in action include the Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, and the systemic oppression of marginalized groups throughout history. These horrific events serve as stark reminders of the destructive potential of the collective shadow when left unacknowledged and unaddressed. The collective shadow can lead to the dehumanization of entire groups of people. Recognizing the collective shadow in our own society requires paying close attention to the dominant narratives, the marginalized groups, and the issues that are most often avoided or denied. Systemic racism, sexism, homophobia, and other forms of discrimination are all manifestations of the collective shadow in many societies. It also requires us to challenge these narratives and advocate for justice and equality. What narratives are we afraid to challenge? What groups do we marginalize? Engaging with the collective shadow in a constructive way involves raising awareness, promoting dialogue, and working to create a more inclusive and compassionate society. This can involve supporting marginalized groups, speaking out against injustice, and educating ourselves about social issues. Art, literature, and activism can play a vital role in exposing and challenging the collective shadow. What can you do to help heal the collective shadow? Understanding the interplay between the shadow and the collective unconscious reveals even greater insights than what we've explored today. The ego, our conscious sense of self, often believes it is in control, but the shadow lurks beneath, subtly influencing our thoughts and actions. Is the ego truly the master of its domain, or merely a puppet dancing to the shadow's tune? The ego perceives itself as the captain of a ship, confidently charting a course, but the shadow operates as the unseen currents beneath the surface, capable of veering the vessel off course despite the captain's best intentions. Our conscious awareness is only part of the story. The persona, the mask we present to the world, contributes significantly to the formation of the shadow by repressing unwanted aspects of the self. Consider the individual who always projects an image of unwavering cheerfulness and optimism. This carefully constructed persona, while seemingly benign, often comes at a cost. To maintain this facade, the individual may be actively repressing feelings of sadness, anger, or vulnerability, emotions deemed unacceptable by their conscious self or by societal expectations. This constant repression acts as a breeding ground for the shadow, where these disowned emotions fester and grow in power. The persona, while necessary for social functioning, can also create a false sense of self, a carefully curated image that is divorced from the individual's authentic inner experience. This disconnect between the persona and the true self widens the divide, feeding the shadow. The interplay between the ego and the shadow is a delicate and often precarious dance. The more rigidly we cling to our persona, the stronger the shadow becomes, creating a dangerous imbalance within the psyche. The ego and the shadow are like two sides of a coin, inseparable yet distinct. The more we focus on one side, the more the other side is hidden from view, relegated to the realm of the unconscious. Integrating the shadow requires a willingness to loosen our grip on the persona, to embrace our imperfections, and to acknowledge the full spectrum of our human experience. To deny one's shadow is to deny a part of oneself, leading to psychological fragmentation and inner conflict. The shadow, therefore, is not simply a repository of repressed feelings, but the direct result of conscious efforts to project an image, or persona, that the ego believes is favorable. It is the price we pay for conformity, for striving to meet external expectations rather than embracing our authentic selves. But to what lengths is the ego willing to go to maintain its desired image, and what is the cost of such rigid control? This leads us to the exploration of specific defense mechanisms that contribute to shadow formation, repression, and dissociation. Repression, a cornerstone of both Freudian and Jungian psychology, can be defined as an unconscious defense mechanism that pushes unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or impulses out of conscious awareness. It is not a conscious choice, a deliberate act of suppression, but rather an automatic response to perceived threats, a psychological reflex designed to protect the ego from overwhelming anxiety or distress. Repression acts as a filter, selectively blocking access to certain aspects of our inner world, preventing them from reaching the light of consciousness. This process, while intended to safeguard the ego, ultimately contributes to the formation of the shadow by creating a repository for disowned aspects of the self. Consider the relatable example of an individual who, as a child, was consistently criticized or punished for expressing anger. In response to this repeated negative reinforcement, the child may learn to repress their anger, pushing it down into the depths of their unconscious, where it becomes a part of their shadow. As an adult, this individual may struggle to assert themselves, to set healthy boundaries, or to express their needs effectively. Their repressed anger, though hidden from conscious awareness, can manifest in subtle yet destructive ways, such as passive-aggressive behavior, chronic resentment, or even physical symptoms like tension headaches or digestive issues. This illustrates how repressed emotions, denied a healthy outlet, can find expression in indirect and often harmful ways. Dissociation, another key defense mechanism, involves separating oneself from one's thoughts, feelings, or experiences, creating a sense of detachment from reality. Dissociation can range from mild forms, such as daydreaming or losing oneself in a book, to more severe forms, such as dissociative identity disorder, where the personality becomes fragmented into distinct alters. In the context of shadow formation, Dissociation serves to create splits in the personality, further isolating disowned aspects of the self. It is like shattering a mirror into fragments, each reflecting a distorted image of the whole. A person who has experienced a traumatic event, such as childhood abuse, may dissociate from the memory of the trauma, creating a split-off part of themselves that holds the unbearable pain and fear. This dissociated part of the personality becomes a part of the shadow existing outside of conscious awareness, yet still exerting a powerful influence on the individual's behavior and relationships. The person may experience sudden shifts in mood, unexplained anxieties, or difficulty forming stable attachments. Dissociation, in its more extreme forms, can lead to a fragmented sense of self, a feeling of being disconnected from one's own body, emotions, and identity. But if repression and dissociation are unconscious mechanisms, how can we become aware of them and begin to heal these inner splits? Repression and dissociation, working in tandem, act to feed the shadow, creating a more powerful and autonomous force within the psyche. These mechanisms, intended to protect us from psychological pain, ultimately serve to perpetuate our suffering by keeping us disconnected from our true selves. To illustrate the destructive consequences of shadow denial, let's consider some compelling case studies, beginning with a historical figure whose life exemplifies this tragic pattern. Robert Oppenheimer, the scientific director of the Manhattan Project, stands as a stark example of the destructive consequences of shadow denial. Oppenheimer, a brilliant physicist, was instrumental in the development of the atomic bomb, a weapon that ushered in the nuclear age and forever changed the course of history. While Oppenheimer was celebrated as a scientific genius and a national hero, he also harbored deep inner turmoil and guilt over the destructive power he had unleashed. His public persona was that of a detached intellectual, a man of science who was simply pursuing knowledge for its own sake. Yet, beneath this carefully constructed facade, Oppenheimer struggled with the moral implications of his creation. Oppenheimer's repressed emotions and disowned traits manifested in his behavior and relationships in subtle yet significant ways. He became increasingly withdrawn and introspective, plagued by nightmares and feelings of remorse. He struggled to reconcile his role as a scientific innovator with his growing awareness of the devastating consequences of his work. His guilt was so intense that it eventually led to a nervous breakdown and a public humiliation during the McCarthy era, when he was accused of being a security risk. Oppenheimer's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of repressing one's conscience and denying the shadow's presence. But he is just one example. Consider also the modern case study of a patient struggling with addiction, illustrating how the shadow can fuel destructive behaviors. This patient, let's call him Mark, came from a background of emotional neglect and trauma. As a child, he was repeatedly told that his feelings were invalid and that he should toughen up and stop being so sensitive. As a result, Mark learned to repress his emotions, to bury his pain deep inside, where it festered and grew into a shadow that haunted him throughout his life. In his adult years, Mark turned to drugs and alcohol as a way to cope with his underlying emotional issues. His addiction provided a temporary escape from his pain, a fleeting sense of power and control in a life that felt otherwise meaningless. The shadow, in this case, became a source of both solace and destruction. Mark's addiction was fueled by his repressed anger, his feelings of shame and inadequacy, and his deep-seated fear of vulnerability. The shadow offered him a way to numb his pain, to silence the voices of self-doubt, and to temporarily escape the burden of his past. But the relief was short-lived. As his addiction progressed, Mark's life spiraled out of control. He lost his job, his family, and his self-respect. The shadow, once a refuge, became his prison, trapping him in a cycle of self-destruction. Looking to literature, Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde provides a compelling exploration of the duality of human nature and the dangers of repressing one's darker eye doctor, Elle says. Dr. Jekyll, a respected physician, embodies the conscious self, striving for moral perfection and repressing his evil mysterious. Mr. Hyde, on the other hand, represents the shadow self, the embodiment of Jekyll's repressed impulses, unleashed upon the world. Jekyll's attempts to separate his good and evil sides ultimately lead to his downfall, as Hyde gains increasing control over his being. As Jekyll writes in his confession, "I thus drew steadily nearer to that truth, by whose partial discovery I have been doomed to such a dreadful shipwreck, that man is not truly one, but truly two." Jekyll's experiment, intended to purify his nature, instead unleashes a monstrous force that he cannot control. His denial of his shadow leads to his destruction, highlighting the importance of acknowledging and integrating all aspects of the self. What do these examples tell us about the importance of acknowledging and integrating our shadows, rather than suppressing them? Shadow integration is not about eliminating the shadow, a futile and ultimately self-defeating endeavor. It is about understanding it, accepting it, and integrating its energies into our conscious lives. It is not about becoming perfect, a mythical ideal that is both unattainable and undesirable. It is about becoming more whole, more authentic, and more fully ourselves. The goal of shadow integration is not to eradicate the darkness, but to illuminate it, to understand its origins, and to harness its potential for growth and transformation. Think of a mosaic. Each piece, even the broken or seemingly insignificant ones, contributes to the overall beauty and integrity of the whole. The shadow is like a broken piece that, when integrated, completes the picture, adding depth, complexity, and richness to our understanding of ourselves. The first steps toward shadow integration involve cultivating self-awareness, self-compassion, and a willingness to explore our inner world without judgment or condemnation. These may seem like simple goals, but they require dedicated effort. Practical tips for cultivating self-awareness include journaling, meditation, and mindfulness practices. Journaling provides a space to explore our thoughts and feelings, to identify recurring patterns, and to gain insight into our motivations and behaviors. Meditation and mindfulness practices help us to become more present in the moment, to observe our thoughts and emotions without getting carried away by them, and to develop a greater sense of self-acceptance. These practices, while seemingly simple, can have a profound impact on our ability to connect with our shadow and to integrate its energies into our lives. It is important to seek support from a therapist or counselor, particularly when dealing with complex or traumatic shadow material. Therapy can provide a safe and supportive space to explore our shadows, to process difficult emotions, and to develop healthy coping mechanisms. A qualified therapist can guide us through the process of shadow integration, helping us to identify our projections, to challenge our limiting beliefs, and to reclaim our disowned aspects of ourselves. The journey into the shadow is not easy, but it is ultimately a journey toward greater wholeness, authenticity, and freedom. But what small step can you take today to begin exploring your own shadow and reclaiming your hidden potential? The journey to wholeness is a lifelong process that will continue in our next video as we explore dream analysis and active imagination. If repression and dissociation are the shadow's first line of defense, unconsciously banishing uncomfortable truths, what happens when these defenses prove insufficient? When the shadow threatens to breach the walls of the ego, more sophisticated mechanisms kick in, designed not to eliminate the shadow, but to manage its impact, to make it palatable, and to protect the ego from facing the full weight of its disowned aspects. These mechanisms, while seemingly more conscious, are often just as insidious, subtly distorting reality and hindering genuine self-awareness. One such mechanism is rationalization, a defense employed by the ego to justify shadow-driven behaviors, in effect, making excuses for the unacceptable. Rationalization is not a conscious act of deception, but rather an unconscious process where perceived acceptable reasons replace the actual motivations. The individual genuinely believes the justification they are offering, unaware of the deeper, shadow-driven impulses at play. Think of it as a lawyer defending a guilty client, twisting the facts, bending the truth, and constructing a narrative that presents a favorable case, not necessarily to convince others, but to convince themselves. The client, in this analogy, is the ego, desperately seeking to maintain its self-image in the face of uncomfortable truths. Rationalization distorts reality and prevents genuine self-awareness, ultimately hindering effective shadow integration efforts. It acts as a smokescreen, obscuring the underlying shadow influences and preventing the individual from taking responsibility for their actions. These distortions manifest as justifications that appear logical on the surface but conceal deeper, unacceptable truths. They are the stories we tell ourselves to avoid facing the uncomfortable reality of our shadow's influence. Consider the individual who lashes out in anger at a colleague, only to later rationalize their behavior by saying, "I was just stressed," or "they deserved it." These are classic examples of rationalization at work, attributing actions to external pressures or perceived provocations, rather than acknowledging the underlying anger, resentment, or insecurity that fueled the outburst. The individual avoids confronting the fact that their anger is a part of their shadow, a disowned aspect of themselves that needs to be acknowledged and integrated. Or consider the person who cheats on their partner and justifies it by saying, "It's not my fault, it's society's fault," or "my needs weren't being met." Again, these rationalizations serve to deflect responsibility, blaming external factors rather than acknowledging the individual's own choices and desires. Rationalization is a master of disguise, capable of cloaking even the darkest impulses in a veil of respectability. Breaking free from rationalization is essential for confronting the shadow. It requires a willingness to challenge our own justifications, to question our motives, and to embrace the uncomfortable truths about ourselves. It demands a level of self-honesty that can be both painful and liberating. If rationalization is the mind's way of sugarcoating reality, what happens when we use our intellect to completely detach from our emotions? Intellectualization is another defense mechanism that employs abstract thinking and excessive analysis to detach from the emotional experiences associated with the shadow, a cognitive workaround. It transforms intense emotional experiences into detached, analytical observations, dissecting feelings rather than feeling them. The individual intellectualizes their anger, for instance, by analyzing its causes and consequences in great detail, without ever actually experiencing the emotion itself. Think of intellectualization as a scientist dissecting a frog, meticulously studying its anatomy, physiology, and behavior, gaining a thorough understanding of its biological workings, but missing the experience of the frog's life, its place in the ecosystem, and the sheer wonder of its existence. The scientist remains detached, objective, and emotionally uninvolved, much like the individual who intellectualizes their shadow, studying it from a distance without ever truly engaging with its emotional impact. Intellectualization creates a barrier to feeling and integrating shadow aspects, hindering emotional processing and personal growth. Over-analysis replaces genuine emotional engagement, creating emotional distance that prevents the necessary vulnerability for shadow integration. It becomes a way of controlling and containing the shadow, keeping it at arm's length rather than embracing it as a part of the self. For example, someone might analyze their anger from a detached, academic perspective, discussing its neurobiological underpinnings, its evolutionary origins, or its social consequences, without ever acknowledging its emotional impact on themselves or others. Or an individual might excessively research shadow work, reading countless books and articles on the subject, becoming an expert in the theory of shadow integration, while avoiding the actual, messy, and uncomfortable work of confronting their own shadow. The intellectualization is a form of avoidance, a way of staying safe and in control, preventing the individual from fully engaging with the emotional depths of their being. Consider the person who uses theoretical frameworks to explain away their own shadow behaviors, citing Jungian concepts to justify their actions without taking personal responsibility. They might say, "I was just acting out my shadow," as if that somehow absolves them of accountability. Intellectualization, while offering a sense of control and understanding, ultimately falls short in fostering true shadow integration. It allows us to talk about the shadow, to analyze it, and to understand it on a cognitive level, but it prevents us from truly experiencing it, from feeling its emotional weight, and from integrating its energies into our conscious lives. Is it possible to truly integrate the shadow without fully experiencing and accepting the uncomfortable emotions it evokes? Emotional vulnerability, the willingness to experience and accept uncomfortable emotions associated with the shadow, is facing the fire. It is not weakness, but the courage to be open to difficult feelings, to allow ourselves to be seen and touched, both physically and emotionally. Think of emotional vulnerability as removing armor, exposing our soft underbelly, and allowing ourselves to be hurt, to be vulnerable, to be real. It is a radical act of self-acceptance, a willingness to embrace our imperfections and to acknowledge the full spectrum of our human experience. Developing emotional resilience and self-compassion is crucial in order to navigate the shadow's depths. These attributes are essential for processing painful emotions without judgment. Self-compassion involves treating ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding we would offer to a dear friend who is struggling. It involves recognizing our common humanity, acknowledging that suffering is a part of the human condition, and practicing mindfulness, observing our thoughts and emotions without getting carried away by them. This process cultivates a sense of inner safety and acceptance, allowing us to approach our shadow with curiosity and compassion rather than fear and condemnation. Emotional resilience enables individuals to withstand the intensity of shadow work without being overwhelmed. It is the ability to bounce back from difficult experiences, to learn from our mistakes, and to maintain a sense of hope and optimism in the face of adversity. Grounding techniques can help people stay present in their bodies during emotional experiences, such as focusing on their breath, connecting with their senses, or engaging in physical activity. Mindfulness can help individuals observe their emotions without judgment, noticing them as they arise and pass away without getting caught up in their stories or identifying with them. Specific techniques for cultivating emotional vulnerability include mindfulness meditation, somatic experiencing, journaling, and seeking support from a therapist. Mindfulness meditation allows us to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, creating space for emotional awareness and acceptance. Somatic experiencing helps us to release trauma and emotional blockages that are stored in the body. Journaling provides a space to explore our inner world, to express our emotions freely, and to gain insight into our patterns and behaviors. And therapy can provide a safe and supportive space to explore our shadows, to process difficult emotions, and to develop healthy coping mechanisms. Emotional vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a source of strength and authenticity. It allows us to connect with others on a deeper level, to build more meaningful relationships, and to live more fully and authentically. How can our willingness to embrace vulnerability serve as a catalyst for unlocking our hidden potential and expressing ourselves more authentically? The very aspects of ourselves we deem unacceptable, the contents of our shadow, are often the wellspring of our most original and innovative ideas. Creativity is not simply about expressing positive emotions or celebrating our strengths. It is also about confronting our darkness, exploring our pain, and giving voice to the hidden aspects of our being. Conventional belief dictates that creativity stems solely from positive emotions and experiences, but this notion overlooks the profound influence of the shadow. Suppressed emotions, unconventional impulses, and darker experiences, when accessed and channeled, can fuel artistic expression, problem-solving, and innovative thinking. Accessing the shadow can unlock new perspectives and ways of seeing the world, providing a unique lens through which to explore complex themes and emotions. The shadow, in this sense, is like a fertile compost heap, full of raw, decaying material that can nourish new growth. The refuse of our psyche, the aspects of ourselves we reject and disown, can become the very ingredients that fuel our creative fires. Consider writers who explore dark themes, delving into the depths of human depravity, or musicians who express anger or pain through their music, giving voice to the unspoken suffering of the world. Think of filmmakers who challenge societal norms, pushing boundaries and exploring taboo subjects, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths. These artists are not simply reveling in negativity. They are using their creativity to process their own shadows and to offer a glimpse into the hidden corners of the human experience. Their willingness to confront darkness has contributed to the power and originality of their work, making it both challenging and transformative. Picasso's Guernica, for example, is a visceral depiction of the horrors of war, born from the artist's outrage and grief over the bombing of a Basque town during the Spanish Civil War. The painting is a raw and unflinching portrayal of suffering, a testament to the power of art to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. By embracing our shadow, we unlock a deeper, more authentic creative potential, transforming our pain into beauty, our darkness into light. Creativity becomes a vehicle for shadow integration, a means of expressing and processing our disowned aspects, leading to a greater sense of wholeness. But is it possible that the very things we try to hide from the world are the key to unlocking our greatest creative gifts? And how can we be sure our journey to express our shadow creatively does not consume us? As we draw these threads together, we find ourselves at the threshold of a deeper understanding, having journeyed through the often murky landscape of the shadow self. It's a complex terrain, fraught with challenges, yet also brimming with untapped potential. This exploration asks us to look at the parts of ourselves that we would rather leave unseen. We've explored the core themes of the shadow, its nature as both a repository of negativity and a source of hidden gifts. We've examined the pervasive impact of projection on our relationships, the subtle ways in which we externalize our disowned traits. We've also considered the vital role of emotional vulnerability in facing our inner darkness, and the unexpected connection between the shadow and creative expression. Through our journey, the transformative power of shadow integration has become clear, for it is not about banishing darkness, but about illuminating it, understanding it, and ultimately integrating it into the totality of who we are. The shadow's duality has been a recurring motif, its capacity for destruction balanced by its equal capacity for growth, innovation, and profound self-knowledge. By diving deep into the shadow, we were able to realize that only by embracing our darker side will we be able to understand our inner light. At the outset of this exploration, we asked whether there is a part of being good that requires some knowledge of evil. Now, having navigated the complexities of the shadow, we can see that the answer is a resounding yes. True goodness is not naivete or ignorance, but a conscious choice made with eyes wide open, aware of the darkness that lurks within and without. We began with a relatively simple concept, the shadow as the disowned aspects of the personality. But by now, our understanding has evolved, revealing the shadow as a multifaceted reality, a dynamic force that shapes our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in countless ways. The very thing we fear most within ourselves, the shadow, may hold the key to our greatest potential. This journey into the shadow is not a solitary quest, but a shared human experience, a reflection of our collective longing for meaning, authenticity, and wholeness. By facing our inner darkness, by acknowledging and accepting the totality of who we are, we illuminate the path to our true selves, unlocking the gifts that lie hidden within. As you move forward, consider how you can continue to explore your own shadow through techniques like dream analysis, active imagination, and journaling, always with the caveat to seek professional guidance when necessary. Reflect on how the insights gained here can be applied to improve your relationships, enhance your creativity, and foster a more compassionate understanding of yourself and others. Consider also Robert Oppenheimer's story, The Heavy Weight of His Shadow, and the lessons learned. The potential for personal and collective transformation through shadow integration is immense, and so consider how you can take the themes explored here and apply them to your life. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadow.